Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a little Irish Breakdown After Dark, presented by our friends at FanDuel. I'm Vince, that's Brian, that's Trevor, and it is Tuesday night, so that means it is time to react to some CFP rankings. They just came out. We got them all written down on our notebooks. We're ready to roll. We've got some things to talk about here, and there are definitely things to talk about here. A lot of people, a lot of Notre Dame fans out there, very worried about what was going to happen because Alabama pooped the bed this weekend and lost to Oklahoma. So what was that going to do to Alabama, to Oklahoma, and therefore Notre Dame? And so we got our answer. And the answer mimicked what we saw from the AP poll and the coaches poll, to be honest, and which is interesting. And we're going to talk about it. So Notre Dame slides in at number 9. So we're going to talk about Notre Dame first, and then we're going to talk about the rest of the rankings after that, gentlemen. So here we go, fellas. Notre Dame at 9. What are your thoughts? Is that what you expected? Is it, are you surprised? Like, where are we?
I'll say this. I did not expect it. Trevor and I both said today during our show that we kind of were preparing for 10, but you could make a case that they should be higher. And I said, I think you could make a case that they're going to be number 8. I just don't see any scenario in which the committee puts them ahead of two more SEC teams. Mm-hmm. But so nine is sort of like that happy medium. I think that's a really good place for Notre Dame to be right now. Sure. Because now they're one upset ahead of them, of Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oregon, or Oklahoma getting upset or just playing poorly. Again, we've seen the committee jump teams because one team plays poorly and another team doesn't. Trevor and I were kind of talking about this before the show. Remember when Notre Dame beat Wake Forest 28-7 and then beat Boston College 19-16, but then Oklahoma leaped them in the rankings back in 2015 because Notre Dame wasn't playing well. And then there's all types of scenarios that go into, how it could go, but the point is, I think number 9 is good for Notre Dame in two regards. One is, as I just said, it puts them one upset away or just a big resume change away from jumping up and hosting. And the second part is it gives them a little bit of breathing room where somebody could leap them and they're still in. Mm-hmm. The fear was you go to 10 and then somebody leaps you. Now you got to get leaped twice. And when you look at the teams on who they have left, Alabama right behind them plays what, Trev? Like Eastern Illinois this weekend, and then Auburn. There's no way that Alabama is going to be able to necessarily jump ahead of Notre Dame as long as Notre Dame handles business, right? Like if Notre Dame beats Syracuse this weekend by 30, and Alabama beats Eastern Illinois by 50, that's not going to boost Alabama ahead of Notre Dame because they're playing an FCS school. Same thing with them playing Auburn in the last game of the regular season. So as long as Notre Dame handles business, it's very hard to envision Notre Dame getting passed up. There was some concern about, well, what if a BYU beats Texas Tech and wins the Big 12 and all these kind of things? Number one, that assumes that Notre Dame won't then jump ahead of Texas Tech, much like we saw them jump ahead of Alabama.
Right.
And then number 2, and they would lose to a team ranked in the same spot, basically. Number 2 is that assumes that BYU would then, would jump ahead of Notre Dame. At 9, I'm not worried about that. At 10, maybe you're a little bit worried about that. If those two teams stay in. And there's the scenario where, Miami's gaining on them. We'll talk about that. But I think now you got to get leaped twice. And, who does Utah have left? We'll talk about that. Who does BYU have left? So there's just really not a lot of room, and there's not a lot of potential resume builders for teams to come all the way up and leap Notre Dame from 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, right? I mean, I think the team that you're most worried about is that team right behind you, jumping you. And with that now happening, I don't, with Notre Dame being ahead of Alabama, with knowing what both teams have left on their schedule, it's going to take a lot of chaos for Alabama to leap ahead of Notre Dame. And I'll explain what that would mean later if you guys are curious about that. But so I think this is good for Notre Dame. It's not the best case scenario, but it's good for Notre Dame in regard to getting in. And I'll just say this, Vince, because Oklahoma's right ahead of them. I would love to go to Norman for the first playoff game. And not even about, Oklahoma sucks. Just I'm still upset that I that I missed an opportunity to go to the Notre Dame Oklahoma game in 2012 because I got out of covering Notre Dame and got back into coaching. So that year I missed an Ireland trip and I missed a Norman trip. So just for me, it'd be awesome to go back there. And then if you think about how crazy that environment was of number 5 versus number 8, imagine what it's going to be now when if it was a playoff game. So I mean, there's just a lot going on, or if let's say USC beats Oregon, or Ole Miss gets beat in the Egg Bowl by Mississippi State, y'all bump up, and now you're hosting Alabama. So the options for round 1 look super intriguing now for me for Notre Dame. So that's my initial thoughts on it. Trev, what say you?
Yeah, I fall in line with a lot of what you said. I am surprised, but I think they got it right. We talked earlier today about how I said this, that I was preparing myself for Notre Dame to come in at 10th. I think they had an argument and should have been ranked above Alabama. And I think they still have an argument to be ranked ahead of Oklahoma, but I understand rewarding them for that big win in Tuscaloosa. It's the first time that Kalen DeBoer lost at home. What's up?
Can I just say one thing to you, Trevor? The argument to pass Oklahoma is not as strong as the argument to pass Alabama based on the metrics that we'll look at. So just to kind of add to what you're saying, there's a case, but the one for Alabama was even stronger. You may continue, kind sir.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely an argument to pass Oklahoma. It was stronger to pass Alabama. But like I said earlier today, I was preparing myself for Notre Dame to come in at 10th, given SEC bias. And, people were walking away from that. I don't know if they watched it or what, but people were walking away from that Alabama-Oklahoma game. I heard Kirk Herbstreit say in the night game that earlier today, Oklahoma and Alabama played in one of the best games of the season. I don't know what kind of quality of football you deem as one of the best games of the season. That wasn't it for me. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame is 9th. That definitely puts them in a really strong position. I'm very excited to talk about some of the other rankings because I do have a lot of thoughts on those that have also came out. But yeah, I think the committee got it right putting Notre Dame at 9th. Puts them in a really good spot. I'm interested to see what happens moving forward.
Vince, what are your thoughts?
I'm basically going to echo a lot of what you guys said. I felt fairly strongly that Notre Dame was going to be 9. Maybe I'm a Pollyanna because you guys were saying 10, and I believe Stiers was saying 10 on his show today.
No. Yeah. When you said you thought they're going to be 9, was that an arguing that that's what you thought they should be or what they would be?
What they would be. They've actually done a lot of what the AP poll has done so far this year. Sure. You know what I mean? And
I think the only exception is what? Oregon?
Yeah, because they drop I think where does Oregon have? Where is Oregon in the AP poll? I don't even remember. Are they 5?
I think.
Yeah, because the first CFP rankings that came out had Oregon a little bit lower, and they stayed strong to that. I never in a million years thought that Notre Dame was going to leap Oregon this week, even though I could make the argument that it should be that way, but it wasn't going to happen like that.
Yeah.
Until they lose another game, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. If they weren't going to be ahead of them the last 2 weeks, they weren't going to randomly jump ahead of them. Like there was nothing in Oregon's resume that was going to change enough.
Correct.
To vault Notre Dame ahead of them. Yeah, I agree.
What are they supposed to do? They played Minnesota, who's a mid-level Big Ten team, and they blew them out. Like they're not going to drop for that. You know what I mean? Like Notre Dame, yes, I think their win over Pitt is more impressive than Oregon's win over Minnesota. Sure, but it's not going to leap Notre Dame 3 spots. You know what I mean? That's not realistic, right? So you have to go by what they have done, and they meaning the committee, what they have done and what they are doing. Notre Dame wasn't going to leap Oregon. That's why you got to root for USC this weekend, right? Because if Oregon loses to USC, they're going to drop like a rock. Like they're going to fall hard, I think, if that's the case. So that's all you need to do.
Literally be 0-2 against ranked teams.
Correct. And their resume will speak louder than anything else.
And then all of a sudden,
Minnesota,
Minnesota would then become one of arguably their best win.
And what does that say? You know what I mean? Like, so Oregon will fall out of the bracket. Like I said out of the rankings.
Yeah.
I meant
I know what
out
you mean.
of the top 12.
I know what you mean.
At that point. Yeah.
So
I'm happy with where things are. So
yeah. I would argue that what the committee should have done, in my opinion, is leave Notre Dame ahead of Oklahoma also.
Okay.
But I'm not going to nitpick it because I think it is close enough to where I'm not going to be like, this is bull crap. I can't believe you. I don't feel that way. But John Bryce had a great article, and I didn't see it until today, where they met with the committee, and the committee gave them all the data that the committee uses to evaluate teams. I think the problem that people have, and I was floored listening to ESPN talk about the rankings update, the lack of understanding for how this process works. They're talking like it's the AP top 25. Where a lot of voters just kind of, here's my ranking, and this team lost, so I'm going to drop them here, and I'm just going to move these teams up. The committee's been very clear that each week we start over, and your resume may look very different one week compared to the next, not just based on who you beat, but who the teams on your schedule beat. But then they also released the data they look at: relative scoring offense, relative scoring defense, relative total offense, total defense, points per play offense, points per play defense, yards per point offense, yards per point defense, average starting field position differential, and then real scoring differential. And when you look at Notre Dame compared to Alabama, it's not even close. Notre Dame is 12 in scoring, Alabama is 17. They're on offense, they're 17 in offense, Bama's 23. Defensively, Notre Dame is 9 and 12. Bama's 12 and 11. Points per play, Notre Dame is third. Alabama's 34th on offense. Defense, Notre Dame is 14. Alabama's 19. Yards per point, Notre Dame is 9 and 11. Offensive defense, Bama's 27 and 25. Oklahoma's got a little bit of a different argument because they're really low on offense. They're 40th and 82nd in real scoring O and total O, and then they're 61st and first in points per play, and then 15th in yards per point. But they're really good on defense. They're 6th and 9th ahead of Notre Dame. They're 6th in points per play. They're 7th in yards per point. But I think the committee's going to look at them and say, okay, they've never been a great offense, but you have to say their offense was definitely worse when John Mateer either wasn't playing or was banged up. And I think they're going to get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there. Plus, they do have that win over Alabama. So I understand Oklahoma being ahead of Notre Dame more, even though I personally would not put them there. So, you've got to be able to have that if you're going to give, real analysis and not be like a fanboy. Is you can say, I personally would not have done that ranking, but I can understand why.
Yep, exactly.
And then Oklahoma doesn't have a bad loss. Their bad loss is what? It's because they've lost to Ole Miss, who's number 6,
and Texas,
and they lost to Texas, who's number 17. Now, it was a bad loss from a point standpoint. They got beat convincingly, but it was still a good team. Whereas Alabama has a loss to a team that's 5-5 and lost to Stanford. You know what I mean? So, that's the difference. That's what's hurting up some of these teams. That's what hurts Miami. That's what hurts some of these other teams in the rankings. Is it's not only that you have the same record and we have a better wins, but you have way worse losses than these other teams. So while I would argue that you could make a strong case that Notre Dame could be 8, I'm also not sitting here saying I think the committee necessarily got it wrong. So I do think the perfect scenario for Notre Dame would have been that you stayed ahead of Oklahoma as well, because you were 2 spots ahead of Oklahoma last week. And I don't think you were going to jump Oklahoma over Oregon again, because Oregon's only has the one loss to the number 2 team in the country. Yeah, they don't have any great wins, but the Iowa win was good. The Minnesota win was good. Iowa even more so when you consider the circumstances. And I don't think Oregon got a lot of benefit of the doubt from the committee because they beat Iowa on the road without 3 of their best offensive players even playing in the game, which matters to me. So I would have put them maybe a spot above, but I'm not going to sit here and hammer the committee for
Oregon may have arguably the toughest road the rest of the regular season.
Oh, sure.
Because they have to play USC, obviously, and then they have to go on the road to Washington. Washington's a tough out at home.
Yep.
Those are 2 tough games. I mean, Oregon could very well lose one or both of those games depending on how things go. So they got a tough road ahead of them. So if you're a Notre Dame fan or you're any team that's behind Oregon, you got to feel pretty good about the potential that they could fall out if they lose either one of those games.
I argue that Oregon should have been below Notre Dame in the first rankings.
And that's fair.
I'm okay with them being ahead now for 2 reasons. One is I do think the Iowa win was impressive, although I would argue that the win over Pitt was more impressive than the win over Iowa, just as far as just strictly with no context, because they were ranked about the same and Notre Dame beat Pitt more convincingly. But the second reason is I now have a greater understanding of what specific data goes into the rankings. So, like, I've always known that there was other metrics that go into the rankings. Now that I understand them, you see that Oregon ranks very high. So I mentioned the numbers earlier. Their offense is 6th and 3rd in relative scoring and relative total offense. They're 10th and 4th in defense. They're 7th and 5th in points per play offense and then defense. And then they're 31st and 18th in yards per point on offense and defense. So their metrics, they're in the models and all the computer models are very high on Oregon. So now that I have a better understanding of the criteria that they use to evaluate each team, I'm a little more comfortable with Oregon being there, because I can't be a hypocrite and say, you guys are just looking at surface level stuff of who they beat and who they didn't beat, and not putting enough emphasis on how they're playing,
Everything
how dominant
else,
they
yeah.
are against the teams that they're playing.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm a little bit more okay with Oregon being where they are, because we should all do that, right? When you get new data and you have a better understanding of how things work, you should be willing to change your opinion. And so that's why I'm comfortable now that Oregon, combined with the win over Iowa, and as we've always said, guys, it wasn't going to matter anyway, because if they go out and beat USC next weekend, beat Oregon, and beat Washington, they're going to have an overall better resume anyway.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if they're there now. But if they lose to one of those two teams, then they're going to fall behind Notre Dame. So it's going to work itself out on the field anyway.
Yep.
Do those numbers that you're talking about, like points per play and yards per play and all that, does that factor in quality of opponent, or is that just faceless?
Yes,
what you're doing?
Yes, it's basic. It factors in. It's sort of like efficiency numbers. It factors in things that you do based on the quality of the teams that you play, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how the formula kicks out, Trev. I've just learned about this today, but it does take into account. It's like the Fermo efficiency index, which how they do their offensive efficiency. Yeah. It's relative to kind of how you do it. And it was funny. It's like some of these people that kind of have these arguments, like I saw the guys at College Football Nerds, who are good dudes. They do some really good work, but they were kind of upset that, that Bama might be ahead of Notre Dame. And they're like, how can you make that case? And I'm like, well, I'll make that case based on just your own numbers, because they track the relative scoring things. But I'm like, if they also have a game simulator on their website that puts in all the numbers for how teams play, and their model has Notre Dame beating Alabama 33-24. So it's like, yeah, I mean, how about you guys look at your own data, and then you can have a sense of, why the teams are what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
can we just talk for a minute? And Trev, before we move on to the rest of the rankings, can we talk for a second about, like, if the rankings go out now, what that would look like and what that would mean for Notre Dame, from a Notre Dame standpoint,
who they're playing,
what the bracket looks like, and just a little bit of that matchup against Oklahoma. I'd like to get your thoughts, Vince, on that, and also Trev's thoughts on that too.
Well, I'm gonna, just in case somebody missed it, I'm gonna give the matchups in the first round. Okay.
Yeah.
So
actually, can you also do this, Vince? Can you just go 25-1?
Oh yeah,
because a lot of people didn't get a chance to see it, and then talk about what those matchups would be.
Absolutely. All right. So at 25, Arizona State. 24, you got Tulane, which would be the highest ranked group of 6 team. That's why they're ranked. 23, Houston. 22, Missouri. 21, Illinois. 20, Tennessee. Tennessee keeps creeping up there. 19, Virginia. 18, Michigan. 17, Texas. 16, Georgia Tech. 15, USC. 14, Vanderbilt. 13, Miami. 12, Utah. 11, BYU. Now you're at the cut line for the playoff. 10, Alabama. 9, Notre Dame. 8, Oklahoma. 7, Oregon. 6, Ole Miss. 5, Texas Tech. And then the 4 byes don't change. You got 4, Georgia. You got 3, Texas A&M. You got 2, IU. And you've got 1, Ohio State. And so what that means is when they put it all together for the bracket, okay, you've got an 8-9 matchup with Notre Dame on the road at Oklahoma. Winner plays Ohio State. You've got Tulane, the group of 6 representative, on the road at Texas Tech. Winner gets Georgia. Then in the 10-7 matchup, you've got Alabama on the road to Oregon. Winner gets IU. And then the 11-6 matchup, you've got Miami on the road to Ole Miss. The winner goes to Texas A&M. Now, here's the thing. because people are talking about this in the chat, and I just want to put this out there, okay? Miami right now is the ACC placeholder because they're the highest ranked ACC team. They have a very slim chance of even making it into the ACC championship. So they're probably, I'm not going to say definitely, they're probably not going to win the ACC. Okay? They're not saying by putting this out here and putting Miami in that slot, they're not projecting Miami to win the ACC championship. They are a placeholder right now for the ACC representative because they're the highest ranked ACC team. So people need to understand that. It's not a projection. It is a right now, in this moment, Miami is the highest ranked ACC team. The best chance Miami has of getting in is to crack the top 10. That's how they get in, right? So we'll see what happens with whoever ends up making it into the ACC championship, who wins the ACC championship. The funny thing is, there is a scenario, a fairly likely scenario, that Miami continues to move up a little bit and the ACC champion bumps them out of the bracket, which I think would be hilarious. But that's a different conversation for a different time. Just wanted to throw that out there so people understand how that works. So specifically to Notre Dame, in this scenario, they are on the road to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Sooners. What are your guys' thoughts? Trevor, why don't you kick this off with the Oklahoma-Notre Dame matchup?
Yeah, I think it would be a really fun matchup to watch. I mean, the last time I watched Notre Dame play Oklahoma down in Norman was 2012. That was a pretty awesome game. That was kind of that was the infamous Brent Musburger call at the end of the game where he's like, "Folks, let me say this loud and clear: Notre Dame is relevant again," and all that stuff. I remember that. That was fantastic during that season. But I like some of the other matchups in the first round. Alabama, Oregon, I think would be really interesting because I think those are two teams that have perceived really good offenses because of their names, but their offenses are different than what people may think they are. Different from last year in multiple different ways. Tulane, Texas Tech is interesting. But I think I would argue that out of the 4 first-round matchups based on these rankings, I think that the Notre Dame-Oklahoma game would be the most intriguing. You'd have Notre Dame's offense, which ranks pretty high in a bunch of different categories, going up against a really good Oklahoma defense. And then you have the struggling Oklahoma offense with the Notre Dame defense that's rebounded. A lot of different storylines coming out of that one. And then next, I would probably put Alabama, Oregon. I think that one would be really interesting as well. And then that'd be cool if Oregon's able to win. They go and they get the rematch with Indiana in a bowl game. And then Notre Dame would get the rematch if they beat Oklahoma and Norman from the national championship a year ago. So I like those matchups. I'm a little indifferent. It is interesting to talk about like Miami's defense, specifically their defensive line, trying to shut down Trinidad Chambliss and Kawan Lacey in that offense. So that's an interesting storyline. But I think my two favorite matchups of these are Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Oregon, Alabama.
Brian, what are your thoughts on some of these matchups? Obviously, Notre Dame, Oklahoma specifically, but any of the other matchups that kind of stand out to you that you, as a fan, would just like to watch?
Yeah, my main focus is obviously on Notre Dame, Oklahoma.
Sure.
Some of the other matchups would be, like I don't care whoever plays the Group of 5 team. I don't care who that is, and I don't really care who plays whatever bad ACC team gets in there. It's Oklahoma, Oregon would be, or Oregon, Alabama would be good, and then of course Notre Dame and Oklahoma would be good. But I think this would be a great matchup for Notre Dame. I think the style of play would really go well for Notre Dame. I think that Oklahoma is very good up front. That would be a battle for Notre Dame, and you'd have to find out right now if your offensive line is good enough to run a championship. That's what I like is know right now who you are, and I think Notre Dame has some advantages from a skill standpoint. But and then of course Notre Dame defense would match up very well against the Oklahoma offense. And the reason I think it's more important to talk about that now is because like talking about the matchups in week 1, like the first week the rankings come out, is kind of like there's a much greater chance that the first round will look like, at least 1 through 10 will look like this when the final ranking comes out. You know what I mean? Like there's a much better chance that, guys, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think there's a legitimate chance that the top 10, when it's all said and done, could look exactly like it did tonight. There's a chance. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but Oklahoma has Missouri and LSU at home. Notre Dame has Syracuse and Stanford. Oregon, we talked about, they have a tough test. Ole Miss, Indiana, and Texas Tech only have one game left. Like the three of them, they only have one game left in the regular season. Georgia has, I think, Charlotte this weekend before playing Georgia Tech.
I was going to say they got Georgia Tech, which could be.
Yeah, but Georgia Tech's not that good this year, and it's on a
I
neutral
know.
field. Like I'm not.
That's true.
Last year's Georgia Tech team is better than this year's Georgia Tech team.
Fair enough.
Now that I could change my opinion if they just go curb stomp. Pitt this weekend. I might change my opinion, but I'm not. I'd have to see that. And Georgia's playing like Notre Dame. Georgia's starting to play some of their best ball now.
I agree.
I mean, two of their three best wins, as far as I don't care quality of wins, but how they played, were in the last 3 weeks. Because I thought they looked really good against Mississippi State, and then I thought they looked actually the last 2 weeks. I thought they looked really good against Mississippi State, and I think they smacked Texas around pretty good. They jumped on them in the second half, but honestly, I felt Georgia had chances to go up bigger than 14-3 at halftime of that game. So I could see, Texas Tech. Let me see who Texas Tech's final opponent is. All Indiana has left is Purdue, and they wouldn't fall behind Notre Dame anyway. They'd still be in. But, Texas Tech is off this weekend. They play at West Virginia. The odds of that happening are slim. Ole Miss, they could lose at Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. That's their only game left. But, especially with all this Lane Kiffin drama, who knows how rampant that is in 2 weeks if he hasn't said, hey, I'm coming back. But, I mean, it's not likely that they're going to, lose that game. So there's a legitimate possibility that outside of, I think the only thing that would change from now until Selection Sunday that I'm confident will change is I think the top 5 will be reorganized a little bit based on conference championship games. Meaning I could see, Texas Tech finishing in the top 4 if, let's say, I don't know, Indiana gets smacked by Ohio State and they drop Indiana from 2 to 5, or Georgia whoops Texas A&M. I could see Georgia going up and Texas A&M falling to 5. Something like that I could see, but it's still basically the same.
Yeah, I believe I know the answer to this question, but you have more information I think than I do. If all the SEC teams win out at this point, obviously A&M's in the championship. Georgia is the one that they would play, correct? With tiebreakers,
so, it's not set yet because if it's a 3-way tie, then it gets a little bit different, and I'm not sure who the winner is of that.
Okay.
If it's head-to-head between Georgia and Ole Miss, then Georgia gets in. If it's head-to-head between Alabama and Georgia, then Alabama gets in. Because remember, Alabama's second loss was non-conference. They only have one conference loss. So they're
6-1.
You have 3 teams in the SEC right now with only one loss because you have Georgia, you have Alabama, and Ole Miss. So I'm not quite sure what the second criteria is.
Okay, I was just curious if you knew
SEC.
What that looked like.
So I'd have to look that up. But it just depends on if Ole Miss gets beat by, I'll have to look it up. But if it just depends. So I'm not sure what if anybody in the chat knows, I'm going to type this in and see kind of what
I'm looking it up right now to see if I can't find it.
Yeah. So I'm just, what's the tiebreaker scenario for the SEC in college football? So
Alabama reaches the SEC championship if they beat Auburn, Texas beats A&M, beat Auburn, Mississippi State beats Ole Miss, beat Auburn, Alabama wins the 3-way tie with Ole Miss, Georgia based on SEC opponent winning percentage. So it sounds like Alabama could go to the SEC championship if everybody wins out. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. So let's see here. Georgia wins the 3-way tie. So if Ole Miss, actually it's Georgia, according to CBS Sports, Georgia wins the 3-way tie with Alabama, Ole Miss based on SEC opponent winning percentage.
Okay.
Is what I'm saying here. So actually Georgia would get
that makes more sense.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we have chalk the rest of the way, then Georgia would get in.
And Georgia gets in. Okay.
It's a lot more straightforward than whatever the heck the Big Ten tiebreaker was last year. You guys remember that?
Lord.
The Big Ten tiebreaker was the overall whoever had the better opponent win-loss record of non-like opponents. That's what the Big Ten was last year.
Does the Big Ten do anything normal, Trevor? They are such a garbage league. I'm sorry. Just some of the stuff that they do is just absolutely stupid. Let's have 24 teams in the playoffs. Let's get into private equity. Let's have 18 teams. Like I just despise the Big Ten so freaking much. I really, really do. But anyway, so I think that's, if you're a Notre Dame fan, what you don't want, I mean, you're almost torn, because if Ole Miss gets beat by Mississippi State, you move up. But then if A&M if Alabama gets into the SEC title game and beats A&M, then they jump you. So you end up at 9 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think the bottom line is Notre Dame's in a great spot at 9, just with what's going on around them and what could potentially. I think 9 is, I think 9 is a really good spot right now. I really do. It's a lot more precarious, or it's a lot less precarious than it would have been if they were at 10. Because then I think we're having a little bit of a different conversation if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I
think you have to legit. There's a lot more scenarios for Notre Dame to get knocked out.
Yeah,
if they stayed at 10.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, do I think it's likely? I still don't know that it's likely, because I would argue that if Texas Tech gets beat by BYU, based on what we just saw, they drop number 4 behind Notre Dame. What makes us think they're not going to drop number 5 behind Notre Dame for losing to BYU in a rematch? Like, you know what I mean? Like, but it's still there as a possibility if you're sitting there at 10. And honestly, I'd kind of be pissed if I was Texas Tech, because they haven't just won this year, guys. They've been dominant in their 10 wins so far. Their only loss, they didn't have their starting quarterback in the game.
Is the committee still working off the same premise that, like, if you lose in the conference championship, they won't punish you for that?
Well, they won't push them out of the playoff, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that they could still reorder things.
Which they did last year.
Yeah.
They changed the order a little bit. Like SMU fell.
I don't know that they would push them out unless it's a conference championship where, the team that gets beat is like 10th or 11th. Maybe they get bumped out at that point. You know what I mean?
What was SMU last year when they got beat by Clemson? Like, they left them in. Now, again, the resumes were not nearly as good last year as there were some bad resumes at that next spot, although Miami had a shot. But let me go look and see what was SMU going into the championship game. So SMU was 8th going into the ACC championship game. So, and then they lost to Clemson and fell to 10th. So, like, they were 8th going into the game against Clemson. That was what I was looking for, Travis. What was their seeding going into the ACC title game, and what it ended up, or ranking, and what it ended up being? Their ranking was 10 going into or coming out of the ACC. So they dropped 2 spots, and then you had, let's see here, you had Texas fell from 2 to 5 after losing to Georgia. Penn State fell from 3 to 4 in the ranking. So, like, they dropped teams down when they lost, but they didn't, like, punish them like would have to happen at Texas Tech. And honestly, I don't think Texas Tech should get dropped out if they lose to BYU. Unless BYU annihilates them. That's a good football team. And they're dominant. And the Big 12 is not like a joke league, like it's a group of 5 league. Like, they're playing good teams. I would still leave them in. I just would put them on the road if they lose to BYU.
Yeah.
But I'm not as nervous about that now that Notre Dame's at 9, because they could get leaped by BYU and have Texas Tech still ahead of them, and you're still in.
You're still in. Exactly. And that's the key.
That is
the key. I think the ACC scenario is the most fascinating right now because of the fact that the highest ranked ACC team isn't even in contention really to be in the ACC championship. And they need a lot to end up happening. Yeah, they need a ton to happen for them to make it into the championship game.
Yeah.
And that part of it is fascinating to me, because I just feel like the ACC is just going to eat itself and still only get 1 team in. And
yes,
at that point, it's not going to be a Notre Dame versus Miami question. It's going to be, you didn't even make it to your league's championship game. You're going to get bumped by your own league.
Yeah. So according to CBS Sports, the scenario for Miami to reach the championship game is, so they got to beat Virginia Tech and Pitt. They need Virginia to beat Virginia Tech. They need Pitt to beat Georgia Tech, Duke to beat North Carolina, SMU to beat Louisville, and then they need Cal to beat SMU and Wake Forest to beat Duke.
That's like 8 different things. That's like, well, parlay that I
Yeah.
would put in and lose. That's what that is, by the way.
Yeah.
So many things have like, are they going to make like a checklist and put it up in their team room?
Yeah.
And just like check things off as they go.
Yeah.
Like
there's one team. Yeah. There's one team. Like the 2 best odds right now are Georgia Tech and Virginia.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech beats Pitt. They're in because they've got one loss. Like, so
and
in this scenario,
Georgia's not a conference team. So it doesn't even
correct.
Because according to Pat Narduzzi, that game doesn't matter at all. So
correct. Doesn't matter. They should just bench all their players and get ready for the ACC title.
Right.
Actually, that's not a terrible idea for Georgia Tech.
I don't disagree with you in that scenario.
In that scenario, Georgia, they beat Pitt. Why play Haynes King against Georgia? You're not getting in the playoff if you beat him, and you run the risk of him getting hurt, and then you lose your chance. But anyway, Virginia gets in if they beat Virginia Tech, and SMU loses to Louisville or Cal. And then Pitt loses to Georgia Tech or Miami. So, like, they just need those 2 teams to lose once. So it's going to be really fascinating, guys, to get in here. SMU still has a shot. They need to beat Louisville and Cal. They need Virginia Tech to beat Virginia. They need Pitt to beat Georgia Tech, and they need Miami to beat Pitt. That gets SMU in.
Things will be
SMU has better shots to get in right now than Miami.
Things will be a lot clearer after this
weekend. Beat Miami.
Right.
Vince.
No, you're good. I was just going to say things will be a lot clearer.
On Miami. Like, don't lose to freaking SMU and you're in the freaking playoffs right now.
Exactly correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah, don't lose to one of the 2 now unranked teams that you lost to.
Correct.
Again, like we said about Alabama last year, the recipe to getting into the playoffs is not that difficult. Don't lose to teams you're not supposed to lose to.
Correct.
Yeah.
And honestly, Miami of all teams should understand that. They lost to 2 teams last year that they shouldn't have lost to, which kept them out of the playoffs.
At the end of the year. Like
it is not that difficult to understand. For anybody that, we can talk head-to-head all we want to, but then by that logic, then Alabama should still be ranked ahead of Georgia. Like, I just that one misses me. What does Pitt have to do to get into the ACC championship game? Because they only have 1 conference loss.
Yeah. So there's 2 different scenarios for them, one in which they play Virginia and then one in which they play SMU. The one in which they play Virginia, they got to beat Georgia Tech and Miami. They need SMU to lose to Louisville or Cal, and they need Virginia to beat Virginia Tech. In that scenario, Miami, Virginia, and Pitt would go. The other scenario is where they played SMU is they have to beat Georgia Tech and Miami. SMU beats Louisville and Cal, and then Virginia Tech beats Virginia. Like, that's the scenario for them to get in. So like Miami just look, Trev, if last year taught us anything with Arizona State, that you never say never, but the odds are very, very unlikely. And the interesting thing with Virginia and Virginia Tech is since what year were you born? 1997?
97.
Since 1997 to now, Virginia and Virginia Tech have played every year except for 2022. And that was the year when the tragedy happened where they had several players get shot and players die. It was just a horrible situation. They canceled the game. They should have canceled the game. They've played every year since Trevor was born until now, and Virginia has only beaten Virginia Tech 4 times. And the most recent time was 2019. They beat them by 9. Virginia, and the previous win before that was 0-3. So and there's been some years Virginia's been pretty good and Virginia Tech was not. You know, you go back to, what was it? Was it 2022 when Virginia Tech was really good, or Virginia was really good, and that game got canceled? So like that would have been a shot for Virginia to beat them, but the game got canceled. But Virginia's had some good teams occasionally, and they haven't beat them. But the best team that I think Virginia's had in the last 10 years was that 19 team with Bryce Perkins, and they beat Virginia Tech that year. I think they've got a shot to finally do that this year, but I'm just not ready to. Being from Virginia, you never assume that UVA is going to beat Virginia Tech. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But this is what's like the whole thing with Miami and Notre Dame. Can we just talk about this for a second? Or Vince, do you have some more you want to talk about the craziness of the ACC?
Yeah,
Because this
the only
weekend's
thing
going to tell us a lot.
Yes, it will. I was just going to say that. So you've got Georgia Tech Pitt, which is obviously if Georgia Tech wins, they're in the ACC championship. It's out. And so if you're a Notre Dame fan, Brian, who do you want to win that game? Because right now Pitt fell out of the rankings, and so is that a quote unquote quality win for Notre Dame right now? But if they go and they beat Georgia Tech, they'll probably jump back into the rankings, and they have a shot of making it into the championship game, which would be massive for Notre Dame if they can make that happen, right?
Yeah, look, to me, there's two scenarios that you want to happen if you're Notre Dame. You want Miami or Pitt to be in the ACC championship game because you want to be able to say, hey, we beat the ACC champ, and so Pitt wins it. If Miami wins the ACC championship, then you're fine because you didn't beat the ACC champ, but the ACC champ is knocking somebody else out. They're not knocking you out.
Correct.
And then the other scenario is there's an opportunity there that if Notre Dame can bump up a spot or two, that if Miami runs a table, there's a chance that Notre Dame and Miami could be playing each other.
Oh, that'd be great.
Like if Miami beats Virginia Tech this weekend, then beats Pitt on the road the following weekend, and then beats Georgia Tech or Virginia the following weekend, all of a sudden Miami's resume does look a lot better.
Sure.
There's a scenario in which they could be 9 or 10 in the rankings at that point in time. And then there's a potential for them to be matched up against Notre Dame and will be at Notre Dame. So, but I don't even care. I'll play Miami wherever. I want a rematch against that team so bad. I don't even care where that game is played. But it's going to be interesting to see, guys, how this, if you're Miami, you need to, here's what's so dumb about what's being said about Notre Dame and Miami. I listened to Reese Davis like 3 times in the show tonight, and Greg McElroy, who I usually like, but this is just such a bad comment. They talked about how, Miami's creeping up on Notre Dame, as if somehow if Miami gets right here, just because they're now close, head-to-head matters. Guys, if the head-to-head mattered enough for Notre Dame to be ranked behind Miami, they would have ranked Notre Dame behind Miami when they first played. There is no, they're getting closer and closer, and because they're closer, now the head-to-head might matter. The head-to-head had Notre Dame and Miami 8 spots apart. If
Correct.
Miami leaps Notre Dame, it's not because of the head-to-head. It's because Miami just destroys their next 2 opponents, and then Notre Dame doesn't. Like, that's the only way Miami's going to get ahead of Notre Dame. And it's not going to be because now they're close enough for the head-to-head to matter. Like, they rank behind Utah right now. They're ranked behind Vanderbilt right now. Or no, were they 13th? Were they ahead of Vandy?
They're 1 spot ahead of Vandy.
Okay, so they are up to 13.
They actually leaped Vandy this past week.
So it's like, guys, those two things have nothing to do with each other. It goes back to the frustration that I have with absolutely not understanding how the ranking systems work. And when I keep saying surface level, this is what I'm talking about. Everybody thinks that it's just this, you beat these teams, you beat these teams, you lost to these teams, you lost to those teams, and that's all that matters, and then head-to-head. That's not how they do the rankings. They look at you and they evaluate you as a team. Who you won and who you lost to is part of the conversation. Head-to-head is part of the conversation, but it's not the end-all, be-all. And when there's a big difference in those two teams, then you're going to be ranked higher. And the reason that Notre Dame and Miami have a very big difference right now in ranking is because Notre Dame has a significantly better offense based on the metrics. Their defenses are close. Miami's slightly better, but not by much. And Notre Dame has a significantly higher strength of schedule than does Miami. So there's not enough closeness in the rankings for the head-to-head to be the trump card. If Notre Dame was the 10th best team in the country and Miami was the 12th best team in the country, based on all the metrics, that might be enough. And it was like really close. That might be enough to maybe move them up. But sometimes you can be 10th and 12th, and there's a giant gap between 10 and 12. And it doesn't matter that head-to-head wasn't enough. So that's the thing that frustrates me is Miami has the head-to-head over Notre Dame, but that's not, okay, nothing else matters. They have the same record, and they have the head-to-head. And, like, I need a lot more than that because that's not how the rankings work. And to listen to people at ESPN continue to just say this nonsense, it's kind of frustrating, to be completely honest with you. You'd think the worldwide leader would have people that, like, I don't know how the rankings work. Can someone other than Heather Dennis please learn how these rankings work? Because right now you guys are just saying a lot of dumb stuff. And this is why you look stupid every year when you get all excited about this, where this one team should be, and you don't understand the metrics. I point to this when they lost their minds when BYU was like not in the top 12 in 2020. Anyone that understands how the process works knows they don't care about 10-0. Because if that's the case, why aren't they advocating for JMU to get in? Where's the crying for JMU to be ranked in the top 25? They're 9-1. Where's the crying for North Texas to get in? They're 9-1. Oh, it's not about just like overall record. It's about the context of all the different aspects of it. Okay, good to know. So it is really frustrating to kind of see how that plays out and just continue to hear that as if like, well, we didn't want to put Notre Dame ahead of Miami because Notre Dame's got a way better resume. But now that Miami's got all the way up to one spot behind Notre Dame, we have no choice but to put them ahead because of the head-to-head. That's not how this works. Yet they keep spewing it over and over and over again. And it really kind of drove me nuts. It really drove me nuts.
And it will continue to drive you nuts over the next few weeks because the narrative will continue to stay the same. I mean, that's just how it's going to go.
Loses.
And they're probably not going to lose to Virginia Tech. And
no, they'll lose to Pitt.
I wouldn't put anything past Miami at this point.
Well, that's a fair. I mean, now they got James Franklin, so I'm sure he'll infuse some.
Miami is 0-1 leaving the state of Florida. So
they got to do it twice.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be warm up in old Pittsburgh here, Vince, for you know what I mean? So
that's a good point.
It's not going to be warm in
it's probably not going to be warm in Blacksburg either. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I know
it might be colder Virginia there. But I'm just looking at like Thursday before they're going to play, it's high of 48 degrees. The Thursday, and that's in Pittsburgh. Let me look up old Blacksburg and see what the weather is going to look like for Blacksburg, Virginia this weekend, according to AccuWeather. So let's see, Saturday it's actually be kind of nice, 60 degrees in Virginia on Saturday. So it won't be cold in the mountains of Virginia. It's just surprising. Usually it gets a little bit colder. So anyway, I don't have a lot of thought that Miami's going to lose to Virginia Tech this weekend. I'll admit that. I'd just say, Trev, I never put anything past Miami. I didn't think they'd lose to Georgia Tech the last 2 years either. And here we are. So, yeah, it's gonna be an interesting couple weeks. That's for sure. Looking at this, but the whole ACC scenario is kind of just it speaks to just how bad your league is, but B, it's like the social media push that they're having with Notre Dame. Why aren't they arguing that they should be ahead of Alabama? You don't got to pass Notre Dame to get in. You just got to pass Alabama. If you get up to 10 and you pass Alabama, then pass Utah, BYU, and Alabama, then guess what, Trevor? It doesn't matter what Notre Dame is because your ACC champ gets in, they're going to be 11th and you're going to be 10th.
Well, and like we said earlier today, why are they not advocating for one of the two teams that will be playing for the conference championship?
It's weird. It's weird.
I just whatever, man.
The graphic they put out today with all the different tweets from people, I retweeted it. I was like, if you're going to use a Chuck Todd quote to try to make your point,
or Clay
your point
Travis,
your point has already been made.
Yes.
What are we talking about here? You are grasping at straws, and I don't understand why that's the argument that the conference is making. It makes no sense whatsoever.
And somebody in the chat said they want two teams in. Well, then make an argument for someone else. Argue for Virginia, not Miami, because Virginia's got a much better shot. Yes, you want the two teams in the championship game ranked the highest, not Miami. The odds of Miami getting in are very slim.
Yep.
But
well, I think it's just because the ACC is losing their ever-loving minds because their flagship team took a swan dive off a cliff this year. They were just assuming that Clemson was going to be ranked in the top 5 and undefeated, like I did. I'm not throwing shade. I predicted Clemson to go undefeated this year, and they are very much defeated. So I understand it. I get it. Like you had all these expectations, but now you're just pushing for the popular team. Again, goes back to clicks. Miami gets clicks. Duke football doesn't get clicks, at least not since Mike Elko left. And I mean, if it tells you the state of the union for the ACC, Georgia Tech is a one-loss team and they're ranked 16th. I mean, kind of tells you like Georgia Tech lost once and they are not sniffing the top 10. That's where the ACC is at as a conference. So they have to push Miami. It is what it is.
Yep. You know what I just thought of? Now we have to listen to Alabama fans all week and the media all week whine and cry about why Alabama is not ranked ahead of Notre Dame.
It's just
and I love the whole well, I know they lost to Florida State, but
right.
Like, no, there's no but. They didn't just lose to Florida State. They got their butts kicked by Florida State. Like kicked. Like thoroughly kicked. They have played mediocre football for a month. Like, they're not a good football. They're not a great football team. They're just a good football team. And it just kind of goes back to, again, the surface level arguments of, oh, well, you know, Alabama has this record against top 25 teams. All right, that's great. That's wonderful. That's not how this works. And you'd think that at some point in time, they would think that, like, you know, there's enough going on here that we're upset about that maybe we don't understand how this process works. So I just think it's hilarious. Now I'm all the national media talking about how's Alabama ahead, and like now this is Chris Felica's new thing. He can get off the stupidity of his comments about Notre Dame and Miami. Now he can go talk about Notre Dame and Alabama. He's like, I'm not against Notre Dame. I think they should both be in. Then why aren't you saying why is Miami behind Utah? Then why are you saying why is Miami behind BYU? If you want both Notre Dame and Miami in, then why aren't you crying about those teams being ahead of Miami? Because at 9, Notre Dame and Miami can both get in at large right now. You know, like, hey, why not? Hey, we beat Florida State convincingly. You lost to Florida State. Why aren't we ahead of them?
Makes too much sense, Brian. Stop using logic. It's not how we operate around here.
I know that data and logic and common sense is for the birds.
All right, gentlemen. Do we have any more comments about any of the rankings or the matchups or anything else? We got a few.
I want to respond to this from Jari Z Bear. How is Miami not ahead of us? This is going to lead to teams not wanting to schedule us because there's no incentive to beating us. Is about what's right. That's an absolutely nonsensical comment to make. With all due respect, I don't know how you can listen to us, and I know you listen to our show all the time because that's a regular, handle super chat provider. How do you not listen to us all this time and still not get this? I've explained it to you over and over and over again. It's not just about the surface level stuff you see on ESPN. Listen to me, folks. There's a reason why we get this right all the time and they don't. Because we actually look at, well, what does the committee say? What is the committee's criteria? And so when I compare the two teams, I'm not comparing my feelings about head-to-head or whatever. I'm looking at the criteria. And if it's close, then head-to-head will trump a team. If it's not close, then head-to-head won't matter. And the reality is if Miami didn't schedule Notre Dame and didn't have that win over Notre Dame, they're not even in the top 20. What's their resume if they don't have a win over Notre Dame? What's their resume? Who have they beaten in the top 25 at that point in time? They're 0-2 against 0-0 against top 25 teams. Do they have any other top 25 wins? Now that South Florida's out, I was going to say Louisville, but they didn't play Louisville. They have 0 top 25 wins. The only reason Miami's even sniffing the playoffs right now is because they beat Notre Dame. Why is Miami ranked higher than a one-loss team in that league? Another 8-2 team in that league who actually has a ranked win in Virginia. Why? Because they beat Notre Dame. If you drop Notre Dame and schedule, I don't know, Purdue, they're not 13. They're not even close to 13 because their metrics aren't good. Otherwise, they'd be Georgia Tech. They'd be Virginia. Because what's their second best win? That they, up until last week, they were all, we got 2 top 25 wins. Over who? We beat South Florida. Oh, okay. How'd that work out? They're not ranked anymore. So now what are you building your resume on? What's the reason that you're ranked in the number 13? What do you guys think that it is? Is it because they beat Florida, Stanford, Syracuse, NC State, Florida State, Bethune-Cookman, USF? No, it's because they beat Notre Dame. That's the only reason they're 13th. So how is Notre Dame and I'm a little frustrated because you put the super chat in like after we just spent 30 minutes basically explaining why Notre Dame is ranked ahead of Miami. Because their resume is significantly better. You guys have all these things all the time of, well, if this happens, teams aren't going to play us. And guess what? Teams still want to keep playing Notre Dame.
Just rattle off the teams that have contracts with Notre Dame moving forward. Like, come on. Like, teams are lined up to play Notre Dame.
Where would they be if they didn't have the win over Notre Dame? Let's say that Miami loses to Notre Dame and beats Louisville. Guess what? They're not sniffing 13. They're not sniffing 13. They're not close to 13. They're like 21, 22. All the other 2-loss teams in the ACC. They're between 19 and 23, 24. So there is incentive for beating Notre Dame. It's called, that's the only reason you're even sniffing the playoffs. That's why teams will play Notre Dame. So,
yeah, it's Miami beating Notre Dame is quite literally the only thing that they've done this season. Like, it's some of it isn't even as complicated as like if you replace, and I agree with everything you're saying, but some of it isn't even as complicated as, well, if you replace Notre Dame with this opponent. Look, here's the facts. Vince, how many games has Notre Dame won in a row?
8.
Cool. How many is Miami? I'll save you the time. It's 2.
It's 2.
What's Miami's largest margin of victory this season? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do not.
It's 42 points. You know who they beat? Bethune-Cookman. Do you know what Notre Dame's largest margin of victory is this season? Arkansas on the road. It's not that hard to figure out. Notre Dame's 2 losses are to the number 3 and number 13 team in the country. Miami's, you have to scroll outside of the rankings to find who they lost to. Why? Because they're not ranked. It's not that hard to figure out, guys. Miami has 2 losses. Notre Dame has 2 losses. You can't just look at it head to head. It's about rankings and times of losses and who you've beaten. Like, it's literally that simple. That's it. Like, it's just how rankings work. You
have to stop listening to ESPN people, guys,
and stay off Twitter. Because
you're always getting this. Well, teams aren't going to play us. Yes, they will.
Yeah, they will.
Yes, they will. Especially these teams that are starving for money because they know what playing Notre Dame does for their program and does what it does for their economy. So it's just that's why. That's why. I mean, it's great points, Trev. It's just the resume is not as lazy as what ESPN and people on Twitter who think that, like, in my responses, I don't stick to 280 characters. I give you all of it because I want to give you real data. I want to make my case with real data. I don't use Notre Dame's won 8 in a row. They're hot and all that, which the committee has pointed to. To your point, Trev, they have said that matters. How you're playing the last month, 2 months of the season does matter. But I'm just looking at the data.
Yeah.
It's not close.
No.
It's not close. Now, is it getting a little bit closer? If Miami wins out, yeah, it could get closer. Miami's resume then could look different. You know, if they beat Virginia Tech badly, and let's say Pitt goes and beats Georgia Tech, they'll jump back in the top 25. And let's say Miami beats Pitt by 40. And then Notre Dame wins their next 2 games by 14 and 17. Then Miami might have a resume that's better than what Notre Dame's is. Alabama might have a better resume than what Notre Dame is by that point in time. If Alabama goes out there and annihilates their next 2 teams, something they haven't done to anybody since Wisconsin. I pointed this out to Trev the other day, Vince. Notre Dame, or what was it, September 18th, September 13th, that Miami or that Alabama played Wisconsin? Do you guys know what the date was?
I can tell you here in about 2 seconds. Alabama played Wisconsin on. Okay, well that doesn't have the date on it.
Is it the third? I think September
The
13th. I think is what it was. Okay,
it's the 13th.
Since the 13th of September, they've had one game where they've scored more than 30 points. And they've only had 2 games where they've scored at least 30 points in that period of time. That was their 3rd game of the season. Notre Dame has more 40-point games against SEC teams than Alabama does, including playing the number 1 team in the SEC right now. So yeah, that's why. Yeah. Bama has actually, matter of fact, let me go look at something real quick. I could be right on this, but I'm not 100% sure. Yes, Notre Dame has more games of 40 points or more against SEC teams than Alabama has scored 40-point games the entire season. Well, what about defense? Alabama does not have a better defense than Notre Dame either. As I just pointed out to you guys, you look at the resume, relative scoring defense, Notre Dame is 9th, Alabama's 12th. Total defense, Notre Dame is 12, Bama's 11. They're better there. Points per play on defense, Notre Dame's 14, Alabama's 19. Yards per point on defense, Notre Dame's 11, Alabama's 25. And I got a pretty good, based on the conversations Trev and I had during our preview of the Syracuse game, I don't think those numbers are going to get worse for Notre Dame the next 2 weeks. I don't. You know what I mean? So it's about understanding the resume and what the committee looks at. And if all you're going to give me is, there was this really just lame response from college football nerds when I pointed out the data to them. And it was like, Bama struggled with this because he says you can't assume they've been, because I said Notre Dame's better than Alabama. They said you can't assume that they've been better when Alabama hasn't been playing Pitt and Navy. You know what I mean? So hold on. I'm actually going to tweet this. And that's why people say you are SEC homers. Tweet sent. That's the whole point. You may think Navy and Pitt suck. The committee doesn't see it that way. People who actually watch film don't see it that way. People that watch film are like, Pitt's not that much different than most of the teams you beat in the SEC. I mean, Navy beat Oklahoma last year in a bowl game. Why do you still assume that these teams are garbage? That's because you're homers. And I like those guys, but that's the kind of stuff. It's like, that's an emotional tweet. You're supposed to be numbers guys. You're supposed to be data guys. And you're giving me an emotional response. Why do you assume that Navy would lose to Missouri? Why do you assume that Navy would lose to Missouri? Pitt would lose to Missouri? Because they're SEC teams and they're not. Well, that's kind of what people assume a lot of times. And then we get the bowl games. Oh, but bowl games don't matter. All right, cool. Notre Dame beat your champ last year by 13. Ohio State beat your champ last year, or your runner-up last year by 14. It's like, what are we doing here? Alabama lost to Michigan, who literally, Newt Rockne had teams that could throw the ball better down the field than what Michigan could last year. I mean, seriously. South Carolina lost to Illinois. Oh, their bowl games don't matter. Well, did those teams have a lot of guys sitting out? Because I don't remember Alabama having a lot of guys sitting out. I don't remember South Carolina having a lot of guys sitting out. Pretty sure Lenore Sellers played in that game. That's the whole point with this. It's understand what the committee's looking at, and then let's have the argument. I did that. 2 weeks ago, I sat here on this show and said, I think Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Oregon. Why am I not making that case now? Because I finally got my hands on the data the committee looks at, and Oregon has a better resume than Notre Dame. Do I think Notre Dame would beat Oregon? Yeah. But here's the thing. Let's look at college football nerds' own model, their model. Notre Dame versus Alabama, 33-24. Notre Dame is projected to win. Notre Dame against Georgia, model me. Notre Dame 35, Georgia 29. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Let's go model me on the College Football Nerds website. Notre Dame 35.6, Alabama or Texas A&M 24. All right, let's go Notre Dame and Oklahoma. Let's see what their model says about that one. Let's model me here. Notre Dame 27.7, Oklahoma 18.6. Let's go to the Ole Miss Rebels, the old Mississippi Rebels, and let's pull them up here, fellas, and see where they are. Where is Ole Miss on their model? Let's model me. Notre Dame 39.2, Ole Miss 26.6. Your own model has Notre Dame beating every single team that the SEC has right now in the playoff rankings. Every single one. Your model. What's your model based off of? The data that the committee uses. That's what your model, not mine, not the Notre Dame Irish Breakdown model. Your model has Notre Dame beating every single team that you have in the top 10. Let's just do all of them. All right, so who's the next ranked SEC team in the rankings? Is it Tennessee?
No, it's Vanderbilt.
Let's go to Vanderbilt, okay? Notre Dame and Vanderbilt. Model me. Notre Dame 35.6, Vanderbilt 29.6. Let's then go to Missouri. Let's see what the model says there. Notre Dame 32.2, Missouri 17.1. Let's go to Tennessee. Let's go Notre Dame 40.1, Tennessee 24.8. Do we really need to go to the unranked teams, or can we just assume that Notre Dame's model, their model, would have Notre Dame projected to beat every single team in the – oh, you know who we forgot, fellas?
Texas.
The old Longhorns. Let's get to Texas. 29.3 to 16.2. Most of those games had Notre Dame winning by – their model projected to win by double digits. Double digits. So, like, where's that model coming from? The data of how the games were played. Notre Dame would be favored to beat all 16 teams in the SEC. All 16. So, you want to know why Notre Dame's ranked ahead of Alabama? Look at your own numbers. Look at your own models. Look at your own data. That's why. I mean, is it that hard? Shouldn't be that hard.
All right, ready to get to some super chats here, Brian? I know you want to take a breath, recoup, got to re-up. Here we go. Christopher Galloway, a.k.a. Black Irish 864. Thank you very much for the super chat. He's very simple. Just win, baby.
Yep.
I agree. Just win. Let everything else fall.
I don't like Trevor's poor face getting covered up when we're doing that. So let's go to this one. This one.
Fatter. All right, Tyler Evans. Thanks for the super chat.
So I put the camera far away.
I know, right? I'm gonna stand back here. Did you see Miami canceling the Notre Dame game, or is it? Did you? Or
I think
do you see?
Do.
Okay.
Do you see Miami canceling the guys? The ACC just can't cancel all these games. They're literally contractually obligated to play X number of teams in the ACC.
Correct.
So, I mean, Miami could do that, but like my thing is like, do that then, and see where you're ranked the next year. See how your rankings look next year if you do that. So, like, go for it. You know, like Notre Dame will probably be able to schedule somebody better than Miami. But your schedule next year, right now, your non-conference schedule is Florida A&M, Central Michigan, and Notre Dame. That's your 3 non-conference games. So, yeah, go drop Notre Dame, and then your conference games are Clemson, Boston College, Florida State, Pitt, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Stanford, and Wake Forest. Yes, drop Notre Dame, go pick up Troy, and see where your resume looks if you're not 10-0.
I mean, I was going to say, that's how IU schedules. So, you know, they drop all the teams that matter.
Yeah, but not really, because they have a win over the number 6 team in the country in Oregon, or number 7 team in Oregon. Well, Miami wouldn't have that.
Right. I'm just saying, I'm talking just non-conference all by itself. Yeah. They drop all the good teams and they
can't get away with that because they don't play in a league that's as respected as much as the Big Ten and the SEC is. That's why that wouldn't work. So, yeah, go for it. Drop them. And then let Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame coaches tell every recruit in the country that Miami's now scared to play. They've now ducked playing at Notre Dame twice.
2 times.
So, yeah.
Rocket 25. Great name, by the way. Thank you for the super chat. Would Oregon losing to USC or UW be Notre Dame's most realistic way to climb to 8 and host? It's the easiest, most efficient way, I think.
Well, I actually don't think that's the most likely upset. I actually think that the most likely upset is Mississippi State beating Ole Miss. Like, just in my opinion. I think that unless Lane Kiffin comes out and says, "Hey guys, I'm not going anywhere," I just think 2 more weeks of this nonsense. Like, he basically went and did like a PR tour on Pat McAfee's show today. Didn't commit to, "Hey, I'm not going anywhere." But I think those are probably my next most likely. I don't think it's a given that Oklahoma runs the table against Missouri. And Missouri looked good this weekend. They're off. Their quarterback, Matt Zollers, is starting to get a little bit more experience under his belt. Their defense has been pretty good most of the year, but they had a really nice win this past weekend over Mississippi State. Mississippi State's been losing, but Trev, you and I have been talking about this in our Thursday shows. They lose, but they compete every week. And Missouri smacked them pretty good this weekend. And Matt Zollers, threw 2 touchdown passes, and Ahmed Hardy ran for 300 yards in that game. So, that's kind of where I'm at. I would say that Oregon losing one of those 2 might be the second most likely, but I'm not going into these next 2 weeks, guys, 100% confident that someone above them is going to lose. Someone above them in position for them to jump up would lose. Like, if Indiana gets beat by Purdue, I doubt they'd fall behind Notre Dame. I definitely would. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm just saying I doubt that they would. If Ohio State loses to Michigan, they're not going to fall behind Notre Dame. If Georgia loses to Georgia Tech, maybe. We just saw the number 4 team lose to the number 11 team, and that team fell behind Notre Dame. That's a possibility. Trev, you tell me if you disagree. You watch those teams a lot as well. I think Georgia Tech has a way less of a chance to beat Georgia this year than they did last year. I just don't think they're as good of a team. Their record,
without how that team is put together, I agree. It comes down to their defense. Haynes King is playing the same exact role. Jamal Haynes has a significantly less role in that offense for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive line isn't performing as well. But to Rocket Super Chat, I do think this is the most likely scenario. Mississippi State Ole Miss is going to be a battle, but I think Mississippi State's battle-hardened season this year has been a little smoke and mirrors. That's just me personally. They battle you hard. They're 1-6 in the SEC. They played some competitive games, but Missouri smacked them, Georgia smacked them, Texas A&M smacked them. So it's could I see it happening? Yeah, but I think USC's hot right now, man. I could see them beating an Oregon team that's a little banged up. I think that's a little more likely. But either scenario, yes, that would be the most realistic way. Because, look, Notre Dame could beat Syracuse by 40. That's not going to make the committee go, all right, time to move them ahead of Oklahoma again. I just don't see it. But just being Notre Dame's opponent, just with it being that. But they measure all metrics.
Yeah.
So a USC win over Oregon this weekend would go a long way in moving Notre Dame up.
Yep. I want to point out to people again, if you're arguing that Notre Dame's resume doesn't stack up to Alabama's and all you're using are the same talking points that media people use on Twitter, then I would once again remind you, you don't know what the resume is. Because you have to either think that there's 1 of 2 options. 1 of 3 options. One is you think the committee is so biased towards Notre Dame that they just keep pumping Notre Dame up. That's one option. Now Notre Dame's the team that that they love Notre Dame now. Well, we've been telling you they've always been fair to Notre Dame. Option number 2, they're stupid. All these former coaches, ADs, and NFL Hall of Famers and stuff like that, they're on the committee, don't know football. And they don't know how to properly look at a resume. Or 3, maybe, just maybe, you and the people on Twitter arguing don't actually know what goes into their resume. Just because Ari Wasserman or Andy Staples, guys who I like, and I'm using people I like, or Josh Pate or Greg McElroy or somebody else says, well, the resume is this compared to this, doesn't mean that's the resume that the committee's looking at. I would encourage you guys again, to once again listen to what I'm telling you. Not that I'm right that Notre Dame should be ahead, but listen to what I'm telling you of what the criteria that they're using is. It's not just top 25 wins. It's not just that. Clearly, you don't think the committee knows that Alabama's 3-1 or 4-1 against top 25 teams? You don't think they know that? Do you think they're literally just saying, well, they lost the most recently, so we have to drop them all the way down to number 10? Do you really think that's it? Or maybe there's more to the resume they're looking at than just the surface level stuff. Maybe they don't put as much value in their top 25 wins because of the way they're winning. Bunch of ugly wins. They have a 3-point win over the number 23 team in the country. Woohoo! Notre Dame just played last week's number 22 team in the country and beat it by 22. So, yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has, like, what's Bama's most impressive SEC win this year? Isn't it like 17 points or something like that? Let's see. They beat Vandy by 16, Georgia by 3, Missouri by 3, South Carolina by 7, LSU by 11. Yeah, 17 points over Tennessee. Notre Dame has a 43-point win over an SEC team this year. An SEC team that your highest ranked SEC team beat by 3. An SEC team who your third highest ranked SEC team beat by 6. So, yeah, there's a lot more that goes into it than just the surface level stuff. So I would encourage you all, if you're going to sit there and argue that Bama should be ahead of Notre Dame, that's totally fair. But at least know what data they're talking about if you're going to argue the resume's better. Trev, I felt like you had a couple things you wanted to add to that rant.
I mean, no, no, not really. I mean, everything that you covered, I'm on the same page with. Like, it's might not be the most correct stance to have, like, but people's minds are going to be what they are. Like, I've just accepted that for a really long time. So I'm going to disagree with it, and I'll call it out for being stupid. But, you know, that's just kind of where I'm at with the whole Notre Dame Miami thing, Notre Dame versus the SEC thing. Like, yeah.
All right, Dylan McGuire, thank you so much for the super chat. Notre Dame auto in if Oregon, Oklahoma, Alabama, or Miami lose one of the 2 final games, or Miami wins the ACC, requiring Georgia Tech loses to Pitt, SMU loses to Louisville, or Cal. Other situations exist, obviously. Michigan win against Ohio State would create madness.
Not for Notre Dame.
Correct.
I mean, Michigan beating Ohio State is going to maybe have Michigan on the conversation for jumping in at the back end, but it wouldn't put them over Notre Dame. They're way behind Notre Dame right now.
Right. They're at like 17 or 18. 18 right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's teams just constantly passing them up. They keep winning and teams just keep passing them up. So it would create madness from a seeding standpoint. I don't think if, like, let's just say the only thing that changes between now and then is Ohio State loses to Michigan. That drops Ohio State in the rankings, but it doesn't drop them out, and it doesn't put Michigan in my opinion. It doesn't. So the rest is Notre Dame's automatically in if Oregon, Oklahoma, Alabama, or Miami lose one of their 2 final games. I don't know that Miami losing has any say in that. I mean, I think there's other scenarios like, I don't know, BYU beats Texas Tech. And
I mean, with Notre Dame being at 9th, like I think they're automatically in if they just win their next 2 games really convincingly.
Yeah.
Like Oregon's already ahead of them. Oklahoma's already ahead of them. Now, Dylan, if this was Notre Dame hosts, then some of that stuff would be a little bit more viable. But like, Notre Dame's 9th. They've made the cut. They're a team above the cut. So they're in if they win out. Like,
I do agree with the second part is Miami winning the ACC would solve a lot of the beefs that people have. Like, okay, fine. Look, Miami won the ACC. They're in. Good. Now we can all move on and stop dealing with that. Yeah, the scenario though for them getting in is wild. I mean, absolutely wild. So I just like Georgia Tech's beat Pitt. That's their scenarios for getting in. Beat Pitt. It's wild. But guys,
the whole,
go ahead, Vince.
I was just gonna say I was perusing the transcript of the chair and what he was talking about for the media, not what he did on ESPN, but what he did for the media. And he was asked multiple times about Notre Dame and Miami, and he flat out said, "This is the best." By the way, I think he listens to the show, but whatever. He flat out said Notre Dame and Miami, the way they do their groupings, and they're not in the same group. He's like, we don't even compare Miami to Notre Dame right now because they're not in the same tier. And he goes, and then
they do like 4-4-4-3-3-3.
Yes,
I think
he's like, they're not even in the same tier, so we're not comparing them. And then he also, both times he was asked, he changed the narrative back to, well, there's also BYU and Utah and Alabama in between Notre Dame and Miami.
Right.
And the question was asked, well, what does Miami have to do? He said, not only do they have to win their next 2 games, but some things have to fall their way with the teams that are ahead of them.
Yes.
So that should tell you real
it's not
clearly.
Like it's Notre Dame's 9 and Miami's 10, and they feel they should be screwed. Like, I could honestly understand if Notre Dame was 8, Miami was 9, and they're like, we now got to go play at Notre Dame when we already beat Notre Dame.
Sure.
Oh, okay. But, like, you have to pass Utah.
Yep.
You have to pass BYU.
And Alabama.
You have to pass Alabama. So they're 13. 12 is Utah. 11 is BYU. 10 is Alabama. Like, why aren't you complaining about those 3 teams?
Correct. And he turned the topic like he's like, there's these other teams too. It's not just Notre Dame. Like, it was a master class, in my opinion, of the way he answered that question.
I'm actually going to pull this up.
I wanted to throw that out there because he is saying exactly what you're saying about the argument between Miami and Notre Dame. They're not even comparing the 2 of them right now because they're not even in the same tier of teams. What else do you need to know?
He did. Here's his answer for somebody asked him about Notre Dame and Alabama. Now, you got to remember, the new committee chair watched Notre Dame beat his school so badly that he fired his coach the next day. I just want to point that out. He's the Arkansas AD. But here's what he said. This is I'm reading this as I'm reading it to you, I'm putting it in my head too. So he says, could you assess Alabama after their loss to OU and also kind of compare and contrast Alabama's resume versus Notre Dame? He said, I would be glad to. I will tell you that we probably spent more time in our committee room comparing 2 or 3 teams at that band with Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama. That goes to Vince's, the 4-4-4, because it'd be 9 through 12. So,
and he also
you're kind of comparing Oklahoma and Notre Dame a little bit, but then
there was a question earlier, and he said they had significant discussion about teams 7 through 10. So, Oregon and then Alabama, Oklahoma, Notre Dame. So it's like those 4, they had significant conversations about those 4. But continue.
Yeah, exactly. No. Thank you, kind sir. I appreciate you. Because that's context that's helpful. But he says, you're asking specifically about Notre Dame and Alabama. Easier to compare because you had the head-to-head matchups last week with Alabama and Oklahoma. Alabama had that string where they had 4 really strong wins at Georgia, against Vandy, Missouri, and Tennessee. Then you look at Notre Dame. They've got a win against Southern Cal and a dominating win last week against a Pitt team that was ranked in our top 25. Really, where you break these teams down in the comparison, Notre Dame and Alabama, Notre Dame has losses to 2 teams that are ranked within the top 13. A 3-point loss against Miami to start the season, and then a 1-point loss versus Texas A&M. Alabama actually has a 2-point loss at home last week against Oklahoma, but they had that loss at the beginning of the season, 31-17 at Florida State, a team that's now 5-5. Florida State, I'm not adding context. This is him saying this.
Correct.
Florida State was up in that game 24-7. They held Alabama to less than 100 yards rushing in that game. That really was a sign of some of the struggles Alabama was going to have rushing the football. Trevor's just loving this right now. You can go back and look at Alabama's game against South Carolina, where they scored 2 touchdowns late to win that game. And then the next game against LSU, where they won both of those games, but didn't rush the ball for 100 yards. Then again, against Oklahoma, was not able to move the ball on the ground. So you look at the games that Alabama has struggled in, starting the season against Florida State, where they struggled with the ball. That's two really good 8-2 teams. But I think you look at the losses of Notre Dame versus the loss of Alabama, and that was really one of the defining metrics that we used.
It's almost like they watch the games, Brian. It's amazing.
Right. Or they go past the surface level stuff and say, yes,
Correct.
Alabama won some of these games against like bottom of the top 25 teams outside of Georgia. That was a great win. And they're kind of barely beating some of these teams. You know, they're struggling to run the ball. I mean, he just mentioned two of their last three games, or actually their last three games. In their last three games, they barely beat South Carolina. They had an ugly win over LSU, and they lost to Oklahoma in a game where they outgained Oklahoma by almost 200 yards. So, again, like, start paying kind of attention to what he's saying here, and you'll get a better sense, you know? So, yeah, I'm going to go through and read this, but that was a brilliant answer. And this is something I complained about the first 2 weeks on this show, is the previous head of the committee was terrible at answering questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm not talking about the TV ones, Vince. It's the copy we get in the email.
Right.
And you're like, dude, this is such a stupid answer. Like, you're only making this worse for yourselves with this dumb answer. Hunter Yurosek is nailing some of these answers.
Yeah.
And
yes,
it's
he
like,
did.
This is why.
And he dives in. He's talking about how they run the ball. And like, I mean, I love it, man. I love it. I'm really hoping that some of these talking heads actually read this transcript right here, because these are the reasons why teams are ranked the way they are. And there's solid evidence for it. Just go and look at it and stop with it's a head-to-head. That's all that matters. Hey, what are we doing? Yeah. Anyway, so I'm glad that actually came through during the show. All right. Cousin Eddie's mobile home. Thank you very much for the super chat. Fellas, I see Oregon and Miami or Georgia Tech losing.
I could see all those teams potentially losing. I really hope Pitt rebound. I don't really know what to think of the Pitt-Miami game yet, because I want to see how Pitt bounces back against Georgia Tech this weekend. But the just strictly from a matchup standpoint, do I think Pitt can beat Miami? Yes, I do.
Absolutely.
My concern, however, is that Pitt's going to have the same problem against Miami that they had against Notre Dame. And that's that they're just going to get whooped in the trenches if Miami shows up. Like, if Miami shows up and plays their game the way that they did against NC State this week, then they'll beat Pitt soundly. I don't know if it'll be like 37-9 late in the fourth quarter. I love that you said that too, Vince, about the Florida State game, because it's like they don't just look at the final score.
Correct.
You know, they're going to look at the whole score, but and remember how that game was played. But the question, though, is it goes back to a point Trevor has made about Miami a lot over the last two seasons, which is Miami's a really good team at home more often than not. You know, their loss to Louisville notwithstanding, I think that was a weird game, you know, Friday night and all that. But, you know, on the road, they barely beat Florida State. Now, they were up big and then let Florida State kind of come back in that game. They went on the road and beat SMU. Last year on the road, they had a really good win over Florida, and that's South Florida, but then they barely beat Cal on the road, needed refereeing help, barely beat Louisville on the road, lost to Georgia Tech, and lost to Syracuse. They have not been a good road team. They're very different when they play on the road. Is that enough to beat Pitt? We'll find out, you know, but I mean, enough for to lose to Pitt, we'll find out. But just matchup wise, if their lines, if Miami shows up to play against Pitt, meaning like they're locked in and ready to go, I think they win that matchup because their lines can control the game. The flip side of that is if their O-line can't protect Carson Beck, and they haven't, I don't think their pass blocking has been as good as Notre Dame's. I don't know if Trev, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think Notre Dame's pass pro the last month and a half of the season has been better than Miami's. Miami doesn't give up a lot of sacks. I think they've only given like 9 sacks all year, but they give up a lot of pressures. And that's when Carson Beck gets in trouble. And so then Pitt's obviously a team that's very good at forcing turnovers and getting after the quarterback. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's going to be the key, is they're going to have to pressure him better than they pressured C.J. Carr. But they forced C.J. Carr into 2 picks, and C.J. Carr doesn't throw a lot of picks. So, yeah, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting matchup. The Oregon one, Trev, I'm looking forward for us having those conversations these next 2 weeks. Those are going to be 2 really good games.
Yeah, for sure.
Super chat from David Galito. Thank you very much for the super chat. Speaking of canceling games, can we all agree that we should tell Stanford to take a hike? 10:30? Shaking my head.
Well, that's not Stanford's fault.
I wish I could blame Stanford for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's an ESPN decision. That's not a Stanford decision. That's not like Stanford was like, please let us have the night game. We really want to play at 7:30 at night. And I don't think that's their fault. I mean, people have always said get rid of Stanford and play another West Coast team. Who's to say that they wouldn't put the Notre Dame Oregon game at 10:30 if that's who they were going to play? I mean, if you want them to play a West Coast team, then you have to understand that there's a possibility that might be the night game. Because why? Why would they put Notre Dame Stanford at 10:30 to punish Notre Dame? No, because that's the best way for them to get ratings at 10:30 at night for the games that are on the docket that week. Man, that's just the reality of it. Is like, why would you not? If you're them, why would you not do that? So that's not Stanford's fault. It's not like Stanford's like, screw you, we're going to play at 7:30 at night. That's a normal nighttime. It's just what happens when you play in different time zones. It's like when Notre Dame had a noon game against Arkansas. I mean, you don't think Arkansas might not have been a little bit pissed about that? Like, why are we kicking off at 11 a.m. our time? It's because they had to play Notre Dame, and that was going to make them a lot of good ratings for that week. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. I mean, you're not, it just, you may not like it. I get it, but that has nothing to do with Stanford. I would want to tell Stanford to take a hike for different reasons. But now with some of the things that are kind of going on, you may want to keep Stanford on the schedule. But I'm also okay if Notre Dame tells them to peace out. We'll play the occasional, ACC.
You get to be part of the ACC rotation. That's what I would do with Stanford.
Yep.
Full life. Wow. Thank you for the big super chat. Appreciate it very much. Many think Denbrock is holding back on some of the playbook for bigger games. We'd love to see more counters and outside runs and 22 formations. Is there any truth to them reserving plays, or are we just using that as an excuse to cope?
Cope for what? That Notre Dame has a top 10 offense in college football this year? Like, if you're coping for the offense, then I look, it's okay to say the offense has to play better. It does. It's okay to say CJ Carr has to play better. He does. If they're going to win a championship, it's okay to say the receivers have to do some better things. The O-line has to do some better things. Those things are all better. Having said that, guys, this is still a top 10 offense. I just got done reading you all the data about how Notre Dame ranks, between 3rd and 12th in all the categories on offense that the committee looks at. I don't want to see them running any 22 formations. I don't want to see any formations where there's multiple tight ends on the field right now, unless it's James Flanagan on the field. Like, I don't want to see it at all. I'd like to see more 21 personnel. 21. Maybe that's what he meant. That might have been what he meant.
Sure.
But, I'd love to see more counters too. Guys, they just ran a 56-yard touchdown on Saturday on a counter. They actually scored 2 rushing touchdowns on a counter play. One was a counter play to Jeremiah Love. The other was a counter play to CJ Carr. Yeah, I'd like to see more of that. Absolutely. But up until last week, CJ Carr led the nation in yards per pass attempt.
Yeah.
Now he's fallen all the way down to number 1 still. Why? Because other people had worse games. Literally, you're 10 games into the season, your starting quarterback leads a redshirt freshman quarterback leads the nation in yards per pass attempt and is number 3 in the country behind only Julian Sain and Francisco Mendoza in passer rating. And we have to cope with that? Their running back is going to win the Doak Walker Award most likely and might be a Heisman finalist, and we have to cope for that? Like, it's okay to be critical, but we have taken this offensive criticism way beyond being critical of the areas that need to improve and turned it into just, we're being emotional right now, and, we need to get a grip. That's what I would say. So let's get to the next super chat here, Vince. You can tell Vince is ready to roll, folks. So we're going to try to get out of here pretty quickly. When Vince starts shaking over there, it's like, okay, I want to get out of here. So we'll get these last 2, and then we'll get rolling. Fighting Irish 595 has seen a lot better Alabama teams go to Jordan Hare and either lose or almost lose. And more recently, those Auburn teams weren't good.
It's just one of those rivalries that records don't mean a thing. Plain and simple. There's just some games in college football that are like that, and that is always one of them, year in and year out.
Yep. Yeah, I think he's right. I've seen worse Auburn teams than this beat better Alabama teams than this. Yes. Absolutely correct. Completely agree. It's a good observation.
Ethan Kaufman, thanks for the super chat. Do you believe Charles will be ready for the playoff? Who would be out on the line? If so, more likely Gray House, redshirt, or transfer?
I mean, I can only go by what we know and what the head coach says and the data we've learned. And right now, what we've been told about Jaden Greathouse is he's going to probably redshirt and then play in the playoffs. That's what I've been told. As of yesterday, Trev, you know who the person I talked to after the game on Saturday who told me the same thing. So,
I mean, shoot, Freeman said it in his press conference.
Yeah, he said it in the press conference.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, he said that, and then that backs up the intel that I was told. Trev, you know who I talked to after the game.
Well, there's somebody with the same last name that
thing.
keeps jumping in our chat saying that he's not
leaving.
He loves Notre Dame and he's not leaving.
Right.
You know,
could things change? Of course, things could always change, but that's the plan right now. I'm not overly optimistic, Ethan, that Charles Jagasaw is going to come back this year.
I'm not either.
I'm not. Just some of the things I'm hearing. John Bryce had reported something about needing that second surgery. And Vince, you and I both know John Bryce doesn't report something like that unless he has very good sources on some injury related thing. So I'm not overly optimistic that Charles is going to be back this year. I am confident that Billy Schrouth will be back.
Me too. Yeah.
But if Charles does come back, I mean, he's going to be a rotation guy and should be a rotation guy because he hasn't played football since like he was practicing at the end of the year last year. He practiced the last couple weeks of the season. He has not practiced at all so far, from what I understand. So that's and I expect Rubio to be back. I think everybody that doesn't have a season-ending injury, I do think will be back for the postseason. But I do believe that Charles Jagasaw is one of those season-ending deals. Ashton Craig won't be back. Those are the only two guys that I could confidently say that aren't going to be back for the playoffs. So we'll see. Freeman said the other day that they expect Rubio back if they. Yeah, he didn't say it. But he's like, it's like he was about to say it, and then he's like, hold on, like if things work out, we expect him back for the postseason. That's my takeaway. So I expect all those guys to be back except for Jagasaw and Craig. Right. Of the guys who are, not season ending already. So that's what I would say about that.
And that's it. Okay. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us for our rankings reaction show, and a lot to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and we will continue to have that conversation throughout our shows for the rest of the week. And then, of course, you can always catch us live after the rankings are released every Tuesday night. So make sure you tune in. A lot of you got the memo, and we're hanging out with us the entire time, and we appreciate that. And make sure you hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're listening to us on the podcast. That really helps us out and doesn't cost you a dime. And we really appreciate the support and the effort that you guys go through to hang with us and support us and all of those things. And so we really appreciate it. Notre Dame's sitting at number 9, everybody. So everybody can just take a breath, have a wonderful night's sleep, and we'll wake up tomorrow to all the chatter about why Notre Dame doesn't deserve to be number 9, but it doesn't matter because that's where they are.
They are.
So everybody can suck. Anyway, so everybody have a great night. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. For Brian and Trevor, I'm Vince. We will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, presented by our friends at FanDuel.